welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys. Hello, and welcome to the CPG Guys podcast, where we explore the omni-channel digital journey of brands and retailers. I'm your co-host, PVSB, and when I'm not podcasting, I serve as the Partnership Acceleration Lead at Flywheel Digital, the leading managed services company that helps brands accelerate e-commerce growth. Both of the other two CPG guys are otherwise disposed today, so I'm handling the hosting duties myself. As we record today's episode, I've just returned from Chicago and the annual Path to Purchase Institute Retail Media Summit, where I spoke in 3 sessions myself, and my CPG Guys colleagues Brian Gildenberg and Andrea Lay each spoke in their own session. We collectively spoke in one together. We were incredibly honored to have so many of the conference attendees approach us and let us know how much they appreciated all of the content we are producing. I can tell you from listening to his messages he was leaving me and all the text, Sri was experiencing major FOMO not being in attendance. At one point, he described the event as our version of Comic-Con. It's the ultimate for digital commerce professionals. I would tend to agree with Sri. You were Miss Sri, but it was nice poking fun at you by posting really great pictures. In any event, before we get to our guest, I want to implore our audience to engage with this great community we've created by, one, subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Apple, Spotify, Overcast, not Stitcher, that's going away, but pretty much everything else. And make sure, of course, you're following us on LinkedIn, where we publish new content every day of the week. Mondays, it's CPG Bites with Mio Marketplace's Sean Halter. Tuesday, Mindshare's Jeff Malmud comes to bring us the Retail Media Minute. Wednesday, our Fresh 4 co-host Andrea Lay from Illume Group shares her new series Behind the Curtain. Thursdays, Brian brings us the Gildenberg Omni-Comment. And of course, Friday, we have a new episode of the Fast Forward podcast. Saturday, we have a new CPG Guys episode. And Sunday, it's the Fresh 4 with both Andrea and PacView's Melissa Burdick. And of course, we are proud to be sponsors of Next Up, formerly Network of Executive Women, whose mission it is to advance all women in business and to promote gender equality in the workplace. We are giving away 50 memberships to this prestigious organization. Please take advantage of the networking and educational resources if you're not already a member of Next Up by emailing us at contact@cpgguys.com. The digital liner notes of this episode contain hyperlinks to our site, the other collective podcast sites, our LinkedIn page, and of course our landing page on Next Up. So let's get to our very special guest, shall we? Today's guest is actually a colleague of mine. We met a few months ago at a global Flywheel enterprise meeting in Baltimore, Maryland. He joined the team at about the same time I did after a professional career that included stops as an engineer at Gallup, the noted research firm, and more recently 12 years at a tiny little digital commerce startup out of Seattle known as Amazon. Yeah, I think we all know who that is, where he worked in its Amazon Ads division, leading the development and commercialization of Amazon Marketing Cloud, a media clean room at the heart of Amazon Ads tech portfolio. Here to speak with us about clean rooms and how Flywheel is leveraging them to help brands create and engage relevant audiences in measurable ways is the Executive Vice President of Insights at Ascential Digital Commerce. Please join me in welcoming to the podcast, Keerat Sharma. Keerat, welcome. How are you, man?
Hi, Peter. So good to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm a longtime listener, lurker, and first-time participant. Very excited. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you for that. And we, as I mentioned in my preamble here, I just got back from the Retail Media Summit in Chicago, and it's so heartwarming for us and humbling, honestly, when people approach us and tell us that they follow our podcast and how they find it educational and entertaining and it resonates with what they're doing. So thank you for that. We are so incredibly appreciative that you're able to join us today. Listeners of this podcast know how retail media is at the center of our community conversation. And clean rooms in Amazon Marketing Cloud are a very hot topic on the agenda of brands that are seeking to engage consumers, leveraging the incredible wealth of behavioral data on retail media and Amazon side of the equation, mingled with a brand's own first-party data assets. So before we get actually into the questions I prepared for our conversation, why don't you share more about what made you join Ascential and what your role is in the organization?
Right on. So at Amazon, I had the opportunity to follow, such a wide number of companies that do so many interesting things with DSP or Amazon Marketing Cloud or anything else. And, Flywheel and Petra and 4K Miles were sort of always on the radar doing really interesting things. I had a chance to talk to Patrick Miller, one of the co-founders of Flywheel and now a co-president at Ascential Digital Commerce. And in that conversation, I thought a lot of his ideas just resonated with the things that I'd been thinking about. And there were a lot of ideas that he had that were very challenging in a very positive way. How he thought about clean room technology and how overall he'd structured an enterprise to work backwards from their clients in a very specific manner where success was measured with very client relevant outcomes. And so it just felt like a very nice evolution of what I'd been working on and a nice challenge to be able to be a part of. And so I was thrilled to have an opportunity to join. My current focus is around analytics and insights and figuring out what's actionable. How do you take all of these analytics and insights and data science related outputs and convert them into things that are usable that can actually help you versus being interesting anecdotes. We do a lot of work within my team on Amazon Marketing Cloud, and we do a lot of work with other APIs, whether it's from the Amazon side or even other retailers. And so, yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Thank you for that, Keerat. What I'm going to do is for our audience, in the digital liner notes of this episode, if you toggle over, most of you are doing this on your mobile device, you're going to find hyperlinks to Keerat's LinkedIn profile, the company's LinkedIn page, and of course the corporate website so that you can follow along and learn and multitask as you're listening to us in what I'm absolutely confident will be a very interesting conversation today. I'm going to kick off the formal questions with this first one, Rim, and let's set the foundation behind it because I think Sri and I joke about this all the time. A clean room is not where you stash all of your household cleaning materials. That is not what a clean room is. That much we know. So why don't you share with us what is a clean room and why is it increasingly considered a very powerful mechanism for the mingling of data sets in our ecosystem, brands and retailers?
Yeah, extremely sensible to start with that foundation. So you probably hear many takes on what a clean room is. I like to start with why does technology even exist in the first place? And so historically, if you had a company that had a very valuable or sensitive set of data that they wanted to use in a collaborative way with another company, and you can apply this to any vertical, by the way. So you can look at it as, financial services or healthcare or anything else, but you've got a valuable data set and you want to collaborate. And collaboration here means you want to somehow make that data set available for some interesting utility with the other company. Well, you could start by just giving the data away. That seems like a terrible idea. You're probably running afoul of lots of the basic hygiene that you're supposed to set with your customers or a variety of obligations that you may have. So great. Don't do that. It's a bad idea. So the second way that companies try to collaborate is you get a legal document that is very clear about what you can and cannot do once you come into contact with some data set that you may want to collaborate over. And that's great. There's a lot of work entailed by the different teams on both sides of these organizations to figure out what those can and cannot look like, and then they're all codified. But it's not exactly foolproof. It feels like it's good hygiene, but fundamentally you're just relying on people to read this document as you hire new people. You're hoping that the document stays true as the companies that you're collaborating with pivot and have different incentives. And so these pieces of paper effectively aren't exactly the best governance mechanism if you have a really valuable data set that you do want to collaborate with. So, okay, that's the second mechanism. The third mechanism is you hire a neutral third-party intermediary that can help you. So company A has their valuable data set. They give it to this neutral third party. Company B is in this collaboration, and company B reaches out to the third party, says they want to do X, Y, and Z with the data. The third party validates that that's okay with company A. It's a little bit of a back and forth, and this can take a little while. Like maybe it takes a month or two, and it's also not exactly cheap. There's an expense involved to these round trip conversations, both in terms of time and it also actual real expense. Somebody has to pay the third party intermediary. And so it can work, but it's not exactly the most agile way to operate if you have a lot of iteration that you want to do. And it's also expensive. So the way that I like to characterize a clean room is there's a layer where you can take this data set that is valuable and useful, and that's sort of a base layer. You then use software on top of that layer to take what you would have put in this legal document and you codify it using configuration or other software-defined policies. And then there's a third layer on top, which provides a variety of different computational approaches that honor the permissions that are software-defined and operate on top of the data. And so that sort of sandwich of three things is effectively a very rudimentary clean room, where you can now approach that computational layer as a collaborator and say, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And the engine, the clean room engine, will do X, Y, and Z as long as those rules that were software defined are being adhered to. So in the case of many of the media clean rooms that we encounter, those rules are typically along the lines of the only queries that we will run will emit aggregate and anonymous output. There's rules that ensure that there's no differencing between the results of query one and the results of subsequent queries. And then, there's other rules about certain types of data aren't sensitive at all. Go ahead and run queries over them in arbitrary manner. And then there are certain types of data that have a sort of medium sensitivity. Perhaps there's a minimum aggregation required on certain types of fields like a postal code and such. But those are all just configurations of what you're worried about that would normally exist in an agreement. And instead you've put them into a piece of technology that just enforces it. And then you can add multiple parties into the mix where you've got data set from entity one and data set from entity two, and they both can approach this collaboration space with the permissions and rules that they want to put on top of their data sets. And then collaborators can execute whatever they want and bind the two data sets together too. So that's how I view a clean room as a starting point. So why build a clean room, I guess is another question. Obviously, if you want to enter a collaboration, you'd build a clean room, but why enter this collaboration in the first place? And so one reason is, well, there's these 2 or 3 or n number of distinct data sets that need to be joined together in some interesting way to produce some interesting reporting or analytics. Excellent. That's a good reason. But I think one of the more compelling reasons beyond that is there's only so many reports that you can provide on a user interface, right? You can provide a report that shows you, number of impressions, cut by day, cut by audience, cut by something else, cut by something else. That's great. And you can keep adding more and more dials and more switches to this user interface that you build out. But what a clean room does is it says, look, fundamentally, this thing looks like a database that you can run queries on top of. And that means that if you're a data analyst, you can create an arbitrarily large number of different types of reports. And you can also treat this like infrastructure, where you can build your own unique types of reports on top of. And so I increasingly think that cleanroom tech is really just infrastructure that you can use in a variety of different ways. And it's a very interesting escape valve where if you're a retail media entity and you need to provide a lot of different types of reporting and a lot of different cuts, and you've got a lot of different customer types ranging from, say, automotive to CPG to financial services, surely the reports that each different persona needs are going to be different. And so why not provide the tooling for each of these different personas to get exactly what they need versus trying to anticipate and build out hundreds of permutations yourself? And so, that's, I think, one of the inherent, very powerful aspects of a clean room. And then the last part, which I just touched on, is it's worth thinking about who the customer persona is for a clean room. And I think is very analogous to who the customer persona is if you were to build a very powerful database. And so your customer personas could range from data analysts who are doing exploratory work about, just to get a sense of whether some hint that they have is going to work, all the way to software engineers who have to build, an entirely new user interface that shows a bunch of insights and corresponding actions and such. And so it runs quite a wide spectrum of different types of customer personas. Anyway, that's how I like to frame how to think about a clean room.
That was terrific, Keerat. I think about that and the ability to essentially present users with what amounts to being a synthetic database that they can build their own reporting on. And I think you kind of teased it out where you said that, listen, if I hire a third-party company, they put the data together, they create an interface for you to report against, you're limited in your ability to execute and ideate on that data based upon the interface that they've created. And if you want to change the interface, well, guess what? It's going to take them time to do that. It's going to cost more money, and it's going to slow you down. So it's not better, it's not faster, and it's not cheaper. So to me, I can see why that mechanism is less desirable than what a clean room is. So that's really great. So why don't we then move to highlight what do you see as being the key features and capabilities of a clean room, and even more specifically within, since you were instrumental in getting it off the ground, Amazon's Marketing Cloud?
So, okay, if you think about the capabilities of a clean room, they largely relate to what the sort of computational operations are that are available on top of the permissions on top of the data. And so today, every media clean room, whether it's Amazon Marketing Cloud, whether it's Google's Ads Data Hubs, whatever it is, offers aggregating query capability. That seems to be table stakes. Great. Increasingly, we're also seeing the ability to curate an audience, which can be activated within the DSP or other product that is directly linked to that clean room.
And a DSP is a demand-side platform that advertisers use to serve up their message to whatever audience is being created.
Yeah, bingo. Thanks, Peter. Exactly. So that's only two, right? And you've got to believe that the set of compute operations that anybody would want on top of a data set that they're collaborating with is going to grow. And so, for example, maybe one of the operations you'd like is to make a reservation for inventory early on, right? And so typically that happens outside the context of a clean room through very specialized tools. But maybe you want to make that reservation using a bit of signal that you have, as well as the signal from, some walled garden. Great. Maybe you want to send in a very complicated set of instructions about when and how to bid with certain types of ad products. Okay, that's a different type of compute operation and instruction. And so I think we'll see a steady growth and lots of new types of compute operations get layered on top. And as we see that, I think we'll also see the space get very commoditized. And so today, these complicated operations that you see from a media clean room, they are increasingly available without the data. So you can bring your own data sets and you can create your own permissions, and then the compute is available. And so if you look at AWS, they've launched AWS clean rooms. If you look at GCP, there's BigQuery clean rooms also. And so this pattern is just going to keep, driving down, where as these specialized media clean rooms identify a way in which something is possible and they operationalize and productionize them, then inevitably those will get commoditized into things that are available for anyone to do in any clean room that may have nothing to do with advertising at all. So anyway, that's just an observation, I guess. And I think we're just scratching the surface here. Like, we've just started with query capabilities in, the last N number of years, but there's lots of other computational possibilities that we need to be looking for. And so who knows, like, even the pattern today is extremely slow data movement, which is fine. Very good for querying, very good for having a stable data set, but maybe there's a bit of streaming data that comes into play here in the future. And, you can have guidance to things that happen in much more real time through the context of a clean room also. I feel like I didn't fully touch on your initial question, though, which is what are some of the key features and capabilities of many of the clean rooms. And so I'd sort of summarize what I just said with two pillars right now. The first is aggregated reporting, construct whatever query you want against the set of data sets that are available in the clean room, all the way to audience activation back within the DSP or other ad product that the clean room is connected to. Those are the two pillar capabilities that most clean rooms offer today.
I think what I like about that is your imagination is only limited by the data restrictions that the other side has put on the access to their data. As long as what you're asking for lives within those computational restrictions that have been put in place, you can go crazy. You don't have to sit to wait for someone to build your report. You don't have to sit and, oh my God, as you mentioned earlier, for those who would negotiate contracts, I didn't consider that when I first wrote the contract. I have to go back and write it. Now I've got it, and the minute you get the lawyers involved, that becomes an inordinate and time-taking effort. So I'm really encouraged about that. So here's the thing I'm hearing, and I heard this the last couple of days for brands that are trying to get a handle on measuring performance marketing across all these different retail media networks that they're talking about. They sit there and they go, oh, maybe a clean room is finally the mechanism that's going to allow me to federate all my efforts, provide a way to measure performance across all these different walled gardens and do it my way. Is that true?
So I think the way that I hear this characterized the most is there will be some grandiose clean rooms, and that meta clean room will be the panacea to this, always on or problem that's been really hard to solve. And I don't think that's true at all. I mean, a clean room of clean rooms.
The clean room of clean rooms, the super duper clean room.
Yeah, I mean, any particular clean room is only going to emit what it is only allowed to emit. There's no sense in having that basic contract get broken because there's some meta clean room on top of it. That makes no sense to me at all. And so I don't think the answer to sort of how does reach and frequency work across different retail media networks get solved through a clean room of clean rooms. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think that clean rooms can help. And so if you're smart about the way that you derive your insights from each of these different clean rooms over time, then there are some heuristics that you can put into play to try and associate those outputs and see if there are indeed the overlaps that you suspect there may be, or if there are inefficiencies in how you're operating. But this notion of you'll be able to trace, customer journey from ad exposure on one retail media network across through ad exposure and conversion on another retail media network through some magical assembly of clean rooms, I think is inherently false. And I think they're all designed to be contained. And that's a good thing because it follows the notion that things that happen in a first-party context are limited to being evaluated in a first-party context. And we're clearly seeing the writing on the wall for lots of sort of third-party associations going on across different sites, apps, contexts, whatever you want to call them. And so don't fight it. That ship has sailed. You're not going to get that. Jump on the bandwagon of there are inferred ways to do this if you have to try and make your associations across a set of different entities and retail media networks and such.
A reminder, audience, that we're speaking with Keerat Sharma, the Executive Vice President of Insights at Ascential Digital Commerce. Thank you for that. I think it's very important that people understand there's not going to be this clean room of clean rooms, as you described, that's going to allow you to plug all of your retail clients into the same clean room and spit output. That commingling of data and all of the guidelines and restrictions is entirely unrealistic. And I think marketers need to understand that. That doesn't mean you can't do some great stuff with it. It's just that super overarching capability is just not within the reality of how this construct is coming into being. So let's move from kind of this general clean room analysis and evaluation. Let's talk specifically about Amazon Marketing Cloud because you have a tremendous amount of experience in your background there. Why don't you share with our audience, from your perspective, what are some of the key tools and resources that are available to a marketer who's looking to execute campaigns through this mechanism?
So from a Flywheel, Perpetua, 4K Miles perspective, who largely use Amazon Marketing Cloud within Ascential digital commerce, the commonalities are that, no surprise, there's a ton of very rich insights that we can gather. Some of those insights aren't actionable. That's okay. They're typically very useful to know. And then as we figure them out, we can work very collaboratively, with the Amazon Marketing Cloud team or other related teams to figure out how to take actions.
Can you think of, just for our audience perspective, what would you consider to be an interesting but not necessarily actionable insight?
Yeah, sure. So we know, for example, that when we have an overlap between certain ad programs, there is a increase in ad performance. So sponsored products plus Amazon DSP yields, in general, for our clients, a higher probability of ROAS. So great. With Amazon Marketing Cloud, we can identify an audience that was exposed to sponsored products impressions, and then push that audience into DSP and create line items that specifically re-expose different creative from the DSP that continues a messaging path and leads to that high probability. So that's great. That's one action that is indeed possible. But the inverse action isn't possible. So if you have an audience that has been exposed on the DSP side and you really seek to follow up with a sponsored products message, that's not a thing that's possible, at this stage at least. And so that's okay. It's useful to know. It's useful to understand. And so you know the direction in which you can take action, and then you can provide, advisement accordingly. That's great. And so that's an example of where you can take action within Amazon Marketing Cloud directly by using the ability to activate an audience within the DSP that you create through AMC. But you can also take a lot of actions outside of Amazon Marketing Cloud. So you can gain insights from AMC and then do something about it outside of AMC. And so, an interesting example there is just looking at frequency distribution over very long periods of time. And so you can say, okay, how does my performance correlate to frequency in very small bucket intervals for a span of time that is, say, a month? And so you can say, oh, that's interesting. There is a small population that we tend to expose to a certain number of impressions well beyond a threshold that we consider reasonable. Okay, great. Head out of AMC, go use either the API or the console, make a whole bunch of changes in the DSP itself, and also, potentially make changes within AMC on creating an audience that has reached a certain amount of cap after a certain amount of time, and have that be negatively targeted in the DSP. So lots of very interesting ways that you can take actions, and the resources on AMC in particular are fantastic. There's a wonderful schema that's updated all the time, a great set of instructional queries that are a good sort of primer on how those tables get used. And then, of course, there's tons of documentation that the team releases all the time.
All right. So that's very helpful. Thank you, Keerat. Let's talk about what you're doing at Ascential Digital Commerce to support building out meaningful solutions for brand clients. What are the primary use cases that your team are focusing on in supporting enablement across the different Ascential platforms that are accessing Amazon Marketing Cloud and what have you?
So I think it's worth sort of going back to what made joining this company so exciting. And so Patrick Miller, the co-president, has this great saying, which I hope I don't butcher, which is, we're a retail company or an e-commerce company that happens to buy a lot of media because it helps sell product. And so if you look at that, it's such a nice client-facing way to think about what success looks like for the brands that we work with. And so in that context, AMC is incredibly useful because we can start looking at what success looks like for each of our clients in a very tailored manner. And as an example, we have a lot of clients that are indeed CPG clients. That's great. And you have to believe that for any brand that sells consumables, the initial ROAS or initial conversion is good. It's good to know. Great. I'm glad that this is running in some positive manner. But really, you didn't sell the dish soap refill with the intent to only sell the dish soap refill. Your sincere hope and true measure of success is whether that refill is truly bought as a refill many times over in subsequent months. And so that really is where we lean towards with how we think about AMC and how we think about solutions for clients, which is if your notion of success is I need to acquire a customer who I can then provide a really useful product to that they believe in, and then they come back and they buy it over and over again. And therefore, the value of their customer is these purchases all summed up over this long period of time. And then now I measure my advertising investment, and voila, it turns out that I'm actually running very well, even though my initial ROAS may not have looked so thrilling. Okay, great. And so that's a good example, I think, of how AMC really helps us is we get to invent the metrics that we think are sensible on behalf of our customers and then deploy them at scale in production for all of them. So that's sort of one mechanism by which we operate. The other is we can use AMC as sort of a research bed. And so we have a set of clients who are extremely lean. They're willing to lean in with us and learn as mistakes are made and as we iterate and peel back the onion and find something interesting or not, and then go a different direction. And so we have a set of customers for whom we go through those iterations to really figure out what we can learn. And ideally, what we learn is indeed actionable. And we get to some healthy conclusion. And those learnings tend to be very scalable. We can apply those elsewhere also for other clients in the future. And then the stuff that we're doing outside of AMC that I'd love to just shine a little bit of a light on, we've been doing a lot with machine learned techniques to improve how we bid, specifically on sponsored products, where we're able to use things like Amazon Marketing Stream. We're able to use a lot of historic data. We're able to use a lot of the data that we have about performance and expectations from our clients and sort of merge all of that together into these really interesting predictions about where and how we should be spending and bidding. And then we provide those as sort of ongoing directives via Amazon's ads APIs. And then we've also been doing interesting things with generative AI lately, where we're using it as an assistant to part of how our content setup works, in particular for creating product detail pages and the like. So quite a wide array of solutions that we're bringing to bear for our clients.
And is that work you're doing around artificial intelligence on the PDP, is that both in terms of the language content and the visual content? How are you leveraging it?
Our current focus, at least for now in the short term, is much more biased towards language.
Yeah.
We feel like there's really big opportunities there in terms of looking across the corpus of the performance that we've been able to drive at scale across all of our clients, and then using that to inform how to drive better content for each and every one of our clients distinctly, using their brand guidelines, using the way that they like to talk about their products.
Okay. So now you've whet the appetite of probably a lot of brands and brand professionals that listen to this podcast. How do you recommend that brands that are not already leveraging AMC to really start getting engaged in this powerful platform for ones that are endemically selling through the Amazon ecosystem?
So dive in, right? Like there's nothing to lose. Just dive in. If you have access to AMC and you can use it, just get started. Now, the question is, how do I get started? Well, maybe you have a team of data analysts internally. If you do, AMC should look and feel very similar to what they normally use. Any interface that accepts SQL, structured query language, which is what most of the data analysts use, great. And so they can get started. There's great tooling available. There's an instructional query library, which provides a basis to learn and then customize your own. But maybe you don't have that in-house, right? And we know that to be the case for many brands, in which case you need a partner. And there's many partners in the space that we operate in, and all of them have, extremely interesting visuals and compelling narratives, and it's great. Pick a partner who can work backwards from the problems that you face. Pick a partner that is willing to spend the time to understand your business and understand your products and understand your customers and come up with measurement that is absolutely relevant to you. And that's not hard to do. I'm sure there are a number of partners that provide that. We certainly do, and we'd love to talk to anybody. But I'd say focus on a partner who can have that discussion with you and have their data analysts work backwards from your problem specifically, versus picking a partner that just has a lot of dashboards that may be much more commoditized and not tuned to what your needs actually are.
I want to remind our audience that you should visit cpgguys.com, where you can find all of our content on all the major and minor platforms. And if you think your company has some thought leadership to contribute to our community discussion, similar to what we did today, and same topic, different topic, any topic that relates to omnichannel digital, drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. Maybe you can join us for a future episode of this podcast. And of course, don't forget to drop us a rating and a review. Go to cpgguys.com on the navigation bar, open up your Apple Podcast app, your Spotify app, leave us a rating. If you know me, Jackie Robinson is my hero. My favorite number is 42. On the rating scale, the closest number to 42 is 5. So if you're predecessor like that, Keerat, that was subtle. That was sleek, wasn't it? So like 5 is the closest way you can tell me you love me, by getting to the 42. But in any event, leave a rating and rate us a review so we know what you want us to talk about. That helps us guide the direction of this ongoing conversation. And of course, as always, thank you to the 23,000 followers on LinkedIn of our platform. I know just before we got on the air, our colleagues over in Europe at the FMCG guys, they just crossed 5,000 followers. We had a bit of a head start on them, but congrats to them. Collectively, we just love that so many people are engaged in this ongoing conversation, and we try to honor that by producing meaningful content to educate and entertain you. Keerat, thank you so much for coming on, helping us demystify what a clean room is and what it isn't, what Amazon Marketing Cloud can do, and how you can apply it, and ultimately how you can probably start leaning in to leverage its capabilities to drive brand growth. Really appreciate you taking time before we're recording this before the Independence Day weekend to come on and talk to me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and happy 4th of July.
Yeah, I think this was terrific. I mean, talking about the different approaches to mingling data to get a collaborative outcome. You can go the legal way, which takes time and can be very limiting. You can call in a third party to mingle the data for you, which can be very expensive and timely. It's neither better, faster, or cheaper. Or you can start thinking about these clean room technologies where you each set your guidelines on the use of the data, and then your only limitation is your own creativeness and using this data to create audiences and ultimately start to use those audiences to activate through other advertising mechanisms, the demand side platform for doing offsite advertising, or thinking about how you're applying it to your on-site advertising. All that is really incredibly powerful. And of course, how do you start off? What I didn't hear you say is the first thing you need to do is start advertising on Thursday Night Football. For some people, maybe that's the case, but not everybody. What I did hear you say is you really want to dive in and start playing with it to understand how it's going to help your specific brand and the category you operate in. So thanks again for that. And Shri, you missed a great one today. I know you would have been asking some very poignant questions. Now you're just a bystander listening to the episode. More FOMO on your part. I'm sorry after going to the conference and leaving you behind. It's just another time where I've disappointed you. I'm sorry, but you're my brother. Love you very much. And we missed you. We'll see you on the next episode. And to our audience, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to speaking with you on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye. The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.